Welcome to Deal Talk. My name is Jeffrey Veit, and we're going to talk about avoiding dealer tricks and buying smart so that you save big when you purchase a car, truck, motorcycle, boat, motorhome, etc. Just like we do every week, right? We'll cover some of the automotive news as well. This week is going to be kind of centralized. It's just going to be one subject. We're going to jump right into the episode because it's all about electric vehicles. This is like a 6-month or a year break in the coverage, and we're just going to remind ourselves of all the reasons why electrics are good or bad, whatever you decide after you hear the facts. And I'm going to bring up things that are just provable facts. I'm not going to talk about anything else. It's gotten out of hand, as you know, and they're just pushing it on you day after day, and car manufacturers have put so much money into it that now they can't back out. They've got to try to jam it onto you so they're not building as many gas vehicles, and they're taking some of the really name brand models that they build, and they're going to make them totally electric. And that's the only way. I think Camaro is one of those that's going to be just electric, which is like the dumbest thing they've ever done. But no, it's not the dumbest thing GM's ever done. They've done things a lot dumber than that. But they can always go back, I suppose, but I don't know. We'll see. But if you like the podcast today, please take a couple of minutes and do a review on iTunes or Google Play, whichever you use. If you've already done a review, thank you very much. Don't forget to tell your friends and relatives about the podcast. That's important. They'll save, and you'll be a hero. And you can get a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon, from Kindle, actually, or Nook, and download it to your smartphone or to your tablet, and it's a great Christmas present because it's only $3. I think it get any cheaper than that, right? You can buy it for someone as a gift, and then they'll hold it and they'll download it when that person gets on with them. So that's the way to go. I was on that website today with Kindle and those guys, and they don't, when it's all done, I end up with 50 cents if you buy one. So it's really, if 1,000 were sold, I end up with $500 if they sold 1,000, right? And it's like, I'm not doing it for the money, as you can see. It's not about the money. It's about spreading the word, So if you want to get something to carry with you, get a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon or Kindle. I'm telling you, that's the way to go. It's quick reference and it's worth it. Again, I'll tell you, it's not even $3. It's actually $2.99. So it's not even a $3 mark. It's just here under the $3. It's about 60 cents less than my Ventia Pike. Think about that. And this thing could save you thousands, and the Ventia Pike, is gone in an hour. It's or less, 45 minutes or 30 minutes, depending on how many cups I've had that day. So I'm starting to make it at home, though, which is kind of fun. With a French press and stuff, it's kind of neat. And it turns out pretty good. It's still not as good as the stuff you buy in the store, though. I have to be honest about it. I still like driving in and getting a cup. I can't figure out what it is, but what we're going to talk about are the electric knots, right? The things not to do and not why not, and what the story is on each subject. For almost 15 years, electric vehicles have been a huge subject for the talk of the car industry, specifically 15, maybe 20 years. But they've been around for 200 years. Most people don't. You ask people, they'll say, 1970. It was 1832 when the first electric car came out, and it was used as a taxi, and they would drive around the city for an hour, and then they'd swap the batteries, and then they'd drive around for an hour again. Same thing with some of them were used for milk trucks that went on routes. They'd go on a route, and it would, they'd turn it on and off each time, and the battery would last about a route because they only go at, a mile an hour or whatever. But the problem was they couldn't get any, time out of them. Well, guess what? It hasn't changed. They still they get more now, but it's an indication. If you take 200 years to try to get something perfected and you still can't, what does that tell you? It doesn't take a genius to figure out to tell you, maybe you're looking at the wrong thing. Just maybe. And certainly for the wrong reason. They talk about the coverage has been about the Mustang Mach-E, and the Tesla certainly has been the one that's the biggest news. And if you were looking at electric vehicles, Tesla would have to be the one that's probably the highest quality and the best built and certainly the best designed. But it's crazy expensive, right? You could buy 3 cars for the price of a Tesla. That's no baloney. You can, and they won't burn up. To some, they're appealing since modern electric vehicles that have been called on for climate change, which is another example of absolute bullshit. And however EV manufacturers have hidden the downside of these vehicles, I don't know how they get away with it, but they try to hide it as best they can. If you go online and get news about electric vehicles from Google Alerts or some of the other places, sometimes they'll be there and sometimes they won't. I'll find it other places that Google didn't talk about. So they can say what they want, but as big as they are, it's because they're trying to hide it, right? Or they'll make it very small or very, minor. The purpose of this list of knots that we're going to talk about is because we're going to cover things that don't get covered a lot in the news. You can find a couple of videos on YouTube, but you'll find that some talk shows are getting beat up so bad by the left that they just have given up on talking about it because it's just too hard. They won't, facts just don't seem to make any difference to the climate change people. It doesn't matter what the facts are. This is what we think, right? First of all, you got a short range anxiety problem, right? That's probably the number one factor that comes up with e-vehicles. You ask people about them. What do you think? Well, I don't go far enough. I like wanting something to go a lot farther, but simply modern electric vehicles are range limited due to their small capacity batteries. They have batteries, but they're just not enough yet. They cover the whole bottom of the vehicle. On a Tesla, it weighs 1,000 pounds. On the smallest cars, the very smallest one, like the smart car that they quit building, it was like 450 pounds. The car couldn't have weighed more than 1,500 pounds, the whole car. It was a tiny little thing. That's another problem with electrics. We'll talk about that later. Tesla's is really, their affordable number is not obtained yet. They talk about it, well, we've got a cheaper model coming out. Well, you can come out with a cheaper model. You know what I mean? You can come out with a battery with 4 wheels and no place to sit. But if you're going to buy a car that serves its purpose as a car or a truck or a EV or whatever, it's got to work that way in terms of all the other things, right? They're still range limited. I don't care what they say. And the batteries, there's not much you can do about it. Most of them have a range of about 150 miles. Yeah, they don't talk about that, but most of them, there's some that get over it. Like Tesla advertises 400 miles. They don't get 400 miles, but that's what he advertises. Because if you run the battery on the headlights and the wipers and the heater and all that stuff, they all take electricity too. And so it doesn't go that far. And if you're driving on the highway at higher speeds, they use more power than at lower speeds. It's exactly the opposite of a gas vehicle. Gas vehicles get better mileage at higher speeds and less mileage at lower speeds, while electric vehicles get more mileage at lower speeds and less mileage at higher speeds. It takes more battery to keep the car going 60 miles an hour. And that's what happened. So that's the first problem. The first problem is short-range anxiety. No matter what they tell you, they'll never come close to a gas vehicle in terms of range. Not in this period of time. Not right now, And when hydrogen comes out, they'll really be in trouble because the hydrogen they're working on, there's a chance of a vehicle that's going to be able to fill it up quickly. It's going to last like a regular tank of gas or longer probably, and it's cheap. The only thing that's going to be expensive is the vehicle itself and the tanks that they put the hydrogen in. But other than that, hydrogen's the most plentiful, thing in the entire universe. Yeah. Another one is long charging times. That's another downside. It's another big problem coming with electric vehicles. To fully charge, you need to connect a vehicle to a power source that's a good one, right? This can often be several hours. However, Tesla and Porsche advertise their models with supercharging abilities. That means they can recharge their batteries to nearly 80% in about a half an hour if you've got a supercharger. There are very few superchargers out there, and all the stations you go to, there's going to be hardly any of their superchargers. And if you buy one for a few $1,000s and put it in your home, well, then you'd have a supercharger in your house. But they don't like to tell you that's 80% of the charge. So now to get 80% of the charge, which is, and let's say the distance that goes is 350 miles, well, now it's only going to go 280 miles unless you go the other 20%, and that's what takes time. Listening to it that's explained by a guy like Tesla, right, I love the guy to death. The fact he believes in this doesn't mean I have to. But I really think he's a great man and a good American. But he explained it. He said, look, it's like a parking lot. When the parking lot's empty, it's easy to find a place to park, and as it gets fuller, it's harder. It's the same with the battery. As it's charging up, it's easy for those electrons to find a place to park. As it gets full, it's a little bit harder, and that's why it takes a lot longer. Those 80% in 30 minutes are 4 or 5 hours for 100%. See, that's the thing. You don't get the whole story from the news media. Even though Tesla and Porsche have made significant improvements, charging is still a long time, right? It's still a long time, and it can't get enough in there it's like driving around with a half a gas tank. You can't get enough mileage out of it. My vehicle will do probably about 600 miles on a tank of gas. You'd never get that out of an electric vehicle. I can go for a trip and not worry about it, right? Putting the vehicle fuel in your car only takes a couple of minutes, too. Charging that battery takes a lot longer. Another problem is planning problems, trip planning. You're going to plan a trip? Small ranges and long charging times can put a strain on the road trips, right? Because let's say you were going to take a trip today from Orlando to Raleigh, North Carolina, which is about 900 miles. You'd have to plan 3 days. You couldn't get there in 2 days, in a day. I can drive it in one 12-hour stretch, and I'm there. But you couldn't do that with an electric vehicle, not even close. You can't plan a fast trip in an electric vehicle without knowing the location of the charging stations, and even then, you still got to get there, and it's got to have a space open to charge, and you got to take the time to charge it. I don't know. And has anybody noticed that drives an electric vehicle where they're building the charging stations? Where are they building those dudes? I wonder if it's near the throughways. Where do they build those? You see, that's the thing. There's so many other sides of this. Other factors to be aware of is the latest weather conditions and temperature changes. Up north can be a problem for an electric vehicle because the cold does affect the battery on an electric vehicle. I remember years ago when the smartphones or mobile phones came out, that if it was really cold out, you had to be careful because it would kill the battery. Well, it doesn't kill the battery on a vehicle, but it puts a strain on it. There's no question about it. And the rain means you got to run the wipers, right? And whenever there's a fire on an electric vehicle, it's not because it's not for no reason. Water is a problem for electric vehicles. They say, well, they're watertight. Yeah, well, what about the ones that burnt? What were they? It's like anything. There's always going to be some exceptions, right? That's why electric cars are only suitable for short trips. I've heard a lot of people talked and interviewed on YouTube and on different talk shows, and they'll say electric vehicle's fine if you have another car. Any of the people that movie stars, drive by their house. They don't have an electric car and nothing else. They have an electric car and a bunch of other cars, so they can say that how smart we are. We not only say what other people tell us our whole lives, but we can buy an electric car and put it in our driveway, and we know that it's worth it. No, it's not worth it. That's only suitable for short trips. What a pain in the neck to have it as your only vehicle. What if you didn't charge it? What if you forget to charge it? Oh, you can't go anywhere. That's the end of it, right? It's not the case when you run out of gas because you got that gas gauge telling you the whole time. You do on the battery too, but it's not like I can just turn around and run and get a few gallons of gas. With an electric vehicle, I can't just turn around and get a few hours of charge. I could, but then that's a few hours before I can go home. So what was the point in heading home? Another one, it's mostly good for urban use. So what is the main playground for electric vehicles? It's the urban areas. EV's range is longer if you drive in the city. Second, there are far more charging stations in the metropolitan areas. There's a lot of areas where there aren't any. In the state of Florida, there's an average of one every 100 miles, 100 square miles. That means in a lot of areas there aren't one. In a lot of areas there's a bunch of them. Like if you go to Miami, I'm sure there's a few. But still a few. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of gas stations. Think about the convenience difference. But there's more charging stations in metropolitan areas, so it'd be a better electric vehicle there. And secondly, if you run out of juice while you're driving in a city, which often happens, you can easily find a cab or an Uber or a bus if you get stuck. Some other form of transportation to get home. But if you're on a highway and you run out of charge, you're in trouble because you can't go down to the gas station, hit check down, get a can of electricity and bring it back to the battery. Nope. Call the wrecker. That's all there is. Call the wrecker. That's what you can do. not so environmentally friendly. That's another one. That's another not for them, right? While it's true that electric vehicles have zero emissions, and they do, zero, did you ever think about what it takes to make just one electric vehicle? Process of making a big chunk of the lithium-ion batteries as well as their disposal and is polluting since they aren't recyclable. Yeah, they've got areas where batteries are stacking up. Now they're trying to find a way to recycle them and rebuild them. Well, it's like recyclable batteries. Have you seen Apple do that yet? Nope. No, you haven't. Seen any phone company do that yet? No, because it doesn't work. That's why. It's not that recyclable. There'll be like a recycled, it's like, what would they call it? Those tires you used to get, right? Tires with treads that were added to them. Retreads, that's it. You could get retreads, you could get rebatteries, revolts or whatever. But electric vehicles demand more electricity, as from the grid, and some of the thermoelectric or nuclear power plants, which are extremely dangerous because they're choking the earth, right? The rising demand for electric power will only raise the level of global pollution, period. There's no way around it. Fossil fuel doesn't make clothes and plastic and all those things. Fossil fuel produces electricity to turn electric motors. That's what it does, or turn on light bulbs. That's it. There's no extra use to it. This is actually far beyond the internal combustion engines are doing now, the pollution. The pollution is bigger than you think because when you charge it, most of the electric companies that are charging your battery, putting electricity in your house to charge your battery, are coal operated. So you're burning coal anyway. I mean, it's not like you're not getting away with anything. It's robbing Peter to pay Paul. What's the difference, right? Another one, they're too expensive. This is a big one for me. This is the one that makes me not even want to talk about it. Since electric vehicles feature the latest, most advanced technology because they've just come out, they cost more. Plus, the electric vehicles cost more, and the cost of the batteries more. For example, there's a range of electric cars for sale on the current market, with the top models going for over $150,000. While there are a few more affordable models like the Volkswagen Golf E and the Nissan Leaf, electric vehicles still cost significantly more than gas fuel models, up to 40% more. And that's more than 40% on some of the luxury models. Try to get an electric Mercedes-Benz, see what happens. Yeah. Look at that F-150, the Lightning F-150s that are selling for $130,000 or $140,000. You have to be a complete imbecile to buy those. I mean, think about it. It's not only a truck that's overpriced, you could buy two gas ones for, but it doesn't drive very long. It has no distance because on a truck, you also got the load that's wearing on the electricity too. That's why they don't go as far. And if you put enough batteries in them to make them go farther, they weigh 1,500 or 2,000 pounds more. So everything else wears out on the truck, like tires and brakes and batteries and all that stuff. Well, there's also the repair difficulties. If you own an electric car, you can forget going to your local shop or fixing it inexpensively. You can't go out and pop the hood and, do some things to it on your own. Nope, that you're out on that. Regardless of the type and the model, all electric vehicles require specific maintenance and service procedures as well as extremely high safety standards. You can't just work on the battery. They can't even swap the battery if yours is bad as a long process. That can take a week. Yeah, think about that. No, I'm not making that up. That's what it can take to get a battery swapped because it is dangerous. I told you about my phone. I whacked my phone and it exploded. Yeah, it was a Google Pixel phone. And I hit it one time on the front because I was throwing it out and it exploded. And I have it. I kept it to prove it. And flame shot out of it and I burnt for a long time. And I finally put it in a bucket of water and it burnt in the water. It was still burning in the water. That's because it's not, fuel. It's not fire. No, it's different. It doesn't require all that oxygen. No. So they're dangerous to service, and the battery packs are hard to get handled right. I mean, there's all these things when it comes to repairs that are going to be a problem. And then you got to find a place to do it and someone that knows how to do it because every electric vehicle is a little different. So you got to find, there's nobody that knows all of them, right? Not like gas cars where you can go to a garage and they know pretty much every model. Another problem is that one of the main downsides of having that big battery pack underneath the car is the additional weight. Did you ever stop and think, well, what difference does that make? Well, while most modern vehicles are heavy due to the extra safety and comfort options, electric vehicles are the heaviest by far. On smaller models like the Kia, talking 450 pounds on the Kia Soul and some of the other small cars, and on a Tesla, you're talking about 1,000 pounds. It puts the car at 2.3 tons. That's almost 5,000 pounds. Heavy vehicles mean more tire wear, more energy consumption, more maintenance. They also take a longer shopping distance. This is another big one people don't realize, but the average electric vehicle takes about 15 feet farther to stop than a gas vehicle. So if you sit and you close your eyes and remember all the close calls you've ever been in your life, would those situations have been any different if you couldn't stop for another 15 feet? Well, of course it would have. That's another thing. That's just the way it is. They take longer to stop. Yep. And nobody can argue with that because there's tests. You can go on Consumer Reporter, you can go on the national website, and you can look at the specs. They take about 15 feet farther to stop. And it doesn't really matter which model it is. I think the lowest is 12 feet with some of the tiny cars, but still 12 feet. 12 feet's a long ways. That's more than the length of the car. I know a lot of times pulling out of parking lots and stuff, there'd have been an accident if I had taken another 15 feet because I stopped in time when they were pulling out in front of me, but I wouldn't have been able to if I took another 15 feet or another 12 feet. The cold temperature issues that I talked about earlier, electric vehicles are notorious for displaying specific problems with the cold. It's a problem for them. They can try to say it isn't, but it is. So since the bulk of the electric vehicle market is in the northern hemisphere, while the winters are cold and snowy, cold weather battery drain can be a big problem. You got a problem enough on a gas vehicle, you have to jump them sometimes in the morning. Well, once you jump start them, you could do that. You can't jump start an electric vehicle. Nope, you're not jump starting it. That's it. If it's dead, you got to call the charger or to call the wrecker if you don't have a charger at home. And if nothing else, just because it's cold, it reduces the range. In harsh winter conditions, it can be a real pain in the neck. It could be life-threatening. There's no question about it. You can freeze to death. And as a matter of fact, despite what climate change says, statistically, more people die from cold than from heat. Oh, yeah. They don't talk about that, though. Low top speeds, although there are some electric supercars with insane high speeds like the Rimac Concept 1, where that one thing is like a rocket ship, right? But it's not very far. It's only for a rocket ship from here to the end of for a couple of blocks. Not a rocket ship to the moon, that's for sure. EVs generally are quite slow. The top speed of a Golf E and a Golf Soul EV is 100 miles per hour under optimum conditions, right? Yeah, so it's like the same with the dual battery gas, the hybrids. They talk to you about the electric vehicle, battery, and a hybrid. Well, all the electric battery does as a hybrid is help power the gas motor, so it gets better gas mileage. Now, you can drive it on that electric motor, but you can only drive it about 25 miles. That's it. That battery's not designed for driving on its own, but it could in an emergency situation. It could drive you about 25 miles, I think is the average, at about 25 or 30 miles an hour. You can't even get to the top speed. You'd have to be on the side of the road, inching along, if you ran out of gas. So you'd have it if you ran out of gas, but you don't. When's the last time you ran out of gas? You don't run out of gas unless you've got a hybrid engine, electric battery, and you think, well, heck, I'm okay because I got that electric engine. Guess what? That's not how it works. They don't tell you all that in the ads, though, right? Having such a low speed is not only disappointing, but it's a problem in emergency. Imagine you're in Europe where the speed limits are crazy, highway speed. You'd be in big trouble. Another problem is highway driving consumption. To fully understand the range that I talked about earlier on the modern electric vehicles, you have to comprehend the energy consumption circle. The advertised range that many manufacturers brag about is the average or city driving figure. However, the highway range is much smaller, sometimes up to half. So if you're looking at a vehicle that gets 400 miles in the city, it might only do 200 or so on Route 95. Yeah. The reason that it's electric vehicles are a lot better in the city is because they have regenerative braking. So when you brake, it's not using the electric vehicle and stuff. That's a process of getting some power back when you're stopping and coasting and stuff in the city, which you're not going to do on the highway. It's like your battery in your flashlight. You ever notice that you click it on and off and it seems to last longer, but if you run it just leave it on, it doesn't last nearly as long as it seems to when you do it in and out. It's the same kind of idea, only that the regenerative braking does actually do something to help charge the battery and keep it charged. During city driving, you use your brakes a lot, which reduces the energy consumption. And that's why they do better in the city. It's as simple as that. However, while driving on the highway, it's far less. So that's another pain in the neck. So when you're taking that long trip, 800 or 900 miles, maybe it's 4 days because you're driving on the highway, unless, you know what I mean? 4 days, and you got 2 weeks vacation, 4 days to come back means you really had 6 days of vacation. That's all you had. How about heavy-duty load? Teslas may lease their fans a Cybertruck, a rig they designed to be the first fully electronic commercial vehicle. But the truth is that it's far from reality. No matter how strong or how big your battery pack is, the energy consumption under a heavy load is excessive. Regardless of the big torque that electric engines produce, when you put a lot of weight on them, they drain the battery quickly. Yes, the internal combustion engine uses more fuel under a load, but not nearly as much as electric. The cost-benefit ratio is way better. And they're doing things on that, on the Cybertruck, Tesla Cybertruck, for instance. Cybertruck is bulletproof, literally. You can't shoot a bullet through the metal on it. It's really powerful. I watched Joe Rogan try to shoot a high-power bow and go through. You normally on a gas vehicle, it goes through and halfway out the other side, it wouldn't go through the door. But I don't know about you, but I'm not in the jungle. I'm not driving around expecting people to shoot arrows at me or shoot guns at me or whatever. I want something that gets better, that lasts mileage-wise and time-wise. I want something, and they can't do that, so they come up with other gimmicks to make it appeal to people. That's something to make it appeal to guys that buy trucks. Oh, look, I took my truck. You can't shoot through it. Yeah, but you can't drive it either. So it's like, it doesn't make sense. And those big trucks, the big ones, like ones that haul giant trucks that haul dirt out of, rock bins and stuff, and those ones that haul truckloads of lumber trucks, for instance, you can't haul those around. You can't get far at all in those because you takes 2 8,000-pound batteries at least to move one, to use one. And then what are you going to get, 300 miles? What do you do when your logs? You pull up to one of those charging stations and have the log sit out in the street or whatever. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and it's ridiculous that they say, well, because of global warming, we need to know that. That's baloney. Global warming is not doing anything for that, and the chances of one country like the United States to go totally electric and have it make any difference whatsoever in the atmosphere, CO2 atmosphere, is ridiculous. It wouldn't make one iota's difference, not one, because the countries like Russia and China, they aren't going electric. I'll tell you, they know better. They're not caught up in this left-wing crazy shit, thinking that it's going to work. It's not going to work. It's not good for them. It's not good for us. What about the vehicle Tesla S and the Porsche Cayenne have advanced infotainment systems, right? Driving aid systems as standard equipment. Tesla even has the infamous autonomous driving system available, right? Which has proven to be far from perfect, resulting in many crashes, even some fatal crashes. These systems are designed to track your driving habits and your locations and your charging points and so on. And so sure that you want, I don't think for a chance that you want your every movement to be recorded on a server. Like, for instance, if they recorded me, it really wouldn't make any difference because I don't do much and I don't go anywhere. I don't get out around much. I do all my stuff over a podcast or on a radio show or whatever, These guys think you want to know what you're doing, and I don't like the idea of it, though. I don't want to have to think that they know what I'm doing. It's none of their goddamn business. And it's the same with electric vehicles. It just makes it easier for them. That is a minor objection, but it's one of many. There are many. Another one is styling. There are some electric vehicles that have stunning, beauty to them, right? But most of them are just plain ordinary. Ho-hum, I call them. They're kind of ho-hum vehicles, at the very least. In the case of the Golf E and the Kia Soul EV, design hasn't changed a bit. However, in the case of Tesla cars and the Nissan Leaf, the design is specific to the model. Not everyone's cup of tea. And the truck, the new truck, the Cybertruck, I don't know about you, but that's downright ugly if you ask me. That's just, it's not indicative of a truck. It's indicative of a cool looking, maybe, if you were driving around with a machine gun sticking out of the top. But it's not indicative of what trucks are used for and designed for. I mean, it's tough to overcome a Chevy Cheyenne or an F-150. They're trucks. They're designed for a truck. They're built that way. The cab's here, the engine's here, and where you load things is here. It's a very simple process, and it works really well. But they're ugly. Even the 2021 Mustang Mach-E, which shares many design elements with the regular gasoline-powered Mustang, is not an attractive car. Most car enthusiasts think the Tesla Model X has a big egg-shaped design failure with falcon doors. It's not. They stick some novelties in there for you to go, ooh. But when you look at the downright design, it's just boring. What about they threaten existing economy models? Sure, economic experts fear that the mass production of electric vehicles and the focus on that kind of technology will destroy the current economic model. That, in turn, will affect global politics and all the worldwide monetary systems as well. If the oil companies lose their monopoly on energy and the oil-rich nations lose their authority on the global political scene, the world could be heading to another crisis. Also think about the enormous car industry, which all the companies that make fuel-related products such as engine parts and fuel injection systems and transmissions and drivetrain components, all these companies and millions of people would be out of a job, which would put further strain on the economy and the global standards that we're talking about. And if they stop building gas electric vehicles, people in lower incomes will not be able to drive, which I personally think is their target, to get 1 out of 5 people driving instead of all the people driving. But if you can't buy a cheap, $20,000 electric car, and there's cars right now that are gas that you can buy. I think the lowest priced new car in America is like $18,900 sticker price. Well, you got anything close to that. There's $40,000, I think, is where they start an electric vehicle. So a lot of people wouldn't be able to buy a car, and the used cars will disappear over time, right? You only have them for so long. So you can buy parts. You think you can have them until they wear out? No, you can have them until they stop selling parts. And if you can't buy parts on it, that's the way. It's like my refrigerator. My refrigerator's going, and there's a part it needs, and I could fix it. But they don't make the part anymore. I'm going to have to buy a new refrigerator when it finally goes. There's nothing I can do about it. The same thing with cars. And that's one of the downsides of pushing the electric market so it phases out the gas. They shouldn't be telling you you have to buy an electric vehicle. They shouldn't be saying all vehicles in this state have to be electric by 2035. That monkey brain doesn't know what they're talking about, because that will destroy the economy in America. Not only that, the standard of living, all these other things, but those are beside the point. I'm talking about the cars themselves. I got to get back on the real subject. Major car companies aren't so sure, although almost all the major car manufacturers have at least one electric vehicle in their lineup. That's true. Most of their CEOs are not fully convinced that electric cars are the future of the industry. Their board of directors and marketing people have observed how problematic the EV segment is, so they hesitate to go all in on electric cars. Some have, right? It's a fact that electric vehicle sales are declining. Don't listen to what they tell you on TV. Bigger percentage of the market, because they're not building gas ones maybe for a particular manufacturer, but they're not. People are smartening up. People are coming out of the fog. The confirmation bias is taking place. There's one way to fight that. That's common sense. And when you look at the facts, common sense tells you electric's not the way to go. It's not. It'd be different if we were going to save humanity by driving electric vehicles. We're not. It's not going to do a thing. And most of the scientists, in fact, recently in the news, you see this one PhD physicist from MIT that they're beating up on because he said there's no such thing as a global warming problem. It's not a problem. And the news is not beating up on him. They made fun of how he combs his hair. All scientists, physicists comb their hair bad. I don't know. Einstein. And my son was a physicist, and he didn't comb his hair at all. And it's the kind of thing that they make it so obvious. They just can't win the people over with lies. They got to do it with the truth, and they're just not doing it. And there's still a lot of money. Some companies like Toyota are still developing gas engines. They got one that they could bring over here, and I'll bet they do when we have another regime in the president's office, which you get 40, 50 miles a gallon. Well, that's another game changer, isn't it? With very low emission. Yeah, and the emissions really aren't the problem at this point. CO2 is not the issue. We're at 400 parts per million. We were 405 or 410 or whatever. It wouldn't make any difference. The planet's been way higher than that before, and it's not going to make any difference. And I'm sure somebody in fake news will say, that's not true. Baloney. I've got the facts. Listen to yours. Some of the big name players are just going to stop. They're going to back out. You watch and see Toyota's starting to slow down on it, and there's other ones that are backing out on it because it's such a commitment. If they don't sell, they're out of business, and they're not going to sell at a profit right now. Most companies that build an electric vehicle are selling them and losing money. Yeah, because they've been pushed by the government. It's like the car business after World War II was pushed, in the 50s, was pushed by the government rules and new laws, and it changed everything. That's what went crazy, and that's why the business got so dark, car business, because the federal government got involved. That's never a good thing. And practicality and usability, the EV craze is limited to just a few world countries. You're not going to see electric vehicles driving around, Zimbabwe, and you're not going to see them driving around, some of the other smaller countries. It's just not going to happen. It's going to take the wealthy countries. I'm not sure that you're even going to see it in a country like England much in the future because, first of all, they've had a lot of problems with fires, but second of all, their economy is really struggling. And you can't have a struggling economy and electric vehicles. You can't do those two. Yep. If you go to remote parts of the world and developing companies, you'll notice that fossil fuels are still that's all they're using. They can't afford those electric vehicles, and they're smart enough to know they're not worth it. They have to focus on getting the work done. They have to focus on getting as many miles out of it as they can because they aren't wealthy. In America, most of the electric vehicles have been sold, and this is a fact. Most of the electric vehicles have been sold to America statistically have been sold with people with higher than average incomes. Yeah, because the other people can't be able to say, I've got one, look how cool I am. But you'll notice they always have another car. They've got a gas car. They're not living on that electric car alone, that's for sure. It just doesn't make sense. And I don't know that it's ever going. It's been 200 years. I think it's long enough. Hydrogen will be different. They'll have a tank in the back, a big tank. And you know how you change the gas tank on your outside cooker, your grill? You go down to Home Depot and you get another tank and give them your empty tank. Well, it's the same thing. You're going to pull in a gas station. They're going to put in a tank of hydrogen. They're going to pull out your old tank and you're going to drive away. And the tanks are going to be reusable and they go down in your car. And that tank will probably last 1,000 miles. It's better. Now, although Tesla's sold, I think, what have they sold? 450,000 cars around the world? I might be off there. Most buyers, in other countries especially, and in America, many people still think it's a gimmick. Specific operation procedures, limited usability, different driving dynamics, and for tech geeks, but not as regular transport devices. They're just not. They're kind of a gimmick. Another problem with them is clearly there are many limits to electric vehicles in general. Even if you own one and are looking to acquire an EV, you should know that it can't fulfill all your transportation needs. That's especially true if you have a family and need dependable vehicle for the whole family. You could use your vehicle in the city for your everyday commute. However, if you want to go on a road trip with your family, you'll need an internal combustion engine due to range concerns or personal peace of mind, and what if it doesn't charge, all these other things, all these other reasons that make it so that you got to have two vehicles if you're going to have one. You can't live on just one electric. And it's like used electric vehicles. Who's going to buy them? People buy used vehicles to save money. Well, you're not going to be able to save money with an electric vehicle unless somehow the people lose 50 or 60 or 70% in their resale value in the first 3 or 4 years. Both are bad, right? Another problem I'll bring up is that they're hard to sell. Most drivers lease their electric cars and then return them to the dealer after 4 years to get a new model. However, those people who have bought electric vehicles could experience great difficulty selling them on the used car market or trading them in at the dealership. It could be really paramount. That's because electric cars depreciate much faster than gas-powered vehicles since the technology is new, so new and still evolving that they depreciate like crazy. In fact, that's been in a number of newspapers within the last month. They've talked about different magazines. They've talked about how they're trying to find a way to deal with the depreciation. But you drive a electric vehicle, let's say you pay more for it, and you get less at the end. You paid more and you get less. That makes the swing could be $40,000 at the end of 4 years. Safety has become another big consideration. This is the one that's really scary. This alone is another reason that I would not buy one. Because when my family was young, I had kids and stuff. Lithium batteries catch fire. The batteries hold a lot of electricity, and they have lithium and manganese. When for many reasons an electric vehicle battery catches fire, it burns at 3 times the temperature of a gas fire. Yeah. Do you wonder why they can't put them out? Well, that's why. It's the heat. The first is fast because it's hot, and that power makes it harder to stop because they can't dilute the fuel. Cutting off the oxygen doesn't really matter like a gas fire because they're burning the manganese and the lithium and stuff. It's not an oxygen-generated flame. On some, it doesn't, the oxygen burns in the flame, but it's not the thing that would stop it from burning and taking it away. The fire is powered from within itself. We've not had gas pumps at our houses except maybe in the farm. If you own a farm, you might have a gas pump out by the barn, gas up the tractor and stuff, right? And just farms that actually do farming, right? The tank's a long way from the house, though. That's because it's not safe. That's why we don't have gas tanks in our house. EV charge at home, in your garage, cables and power charger. If the EV catches fire, your house is gone. Don't let anybody tell you different. Go online and look on YouTube. See what you can come up and get firemen. Look, fire companies and electric fires. They even have special training for them now. But when it catches on fire, unless you can get it out of the garage and tow it out, which it'd be hard to fight the fire, but if you did, it's going to burn your house down because they're not going to put it out. And that's all there is to it. Why would anybody with a sane take that gamble? I don't get it. I don't see how a person could be so strung out on what you're told that you would take the gamble or your house to burn down. But let's say if you're going to not worry about it, at least be smart enough to look at the facts to see if there's more truth. If you're going to take the gamble to have an electric vehicle, at least know that it's going to change global warming. At least get the facts. Don't get some person like John Kerry telling you he doesn't know, he doesn't know who Pat shot at. He's got no idea, that guy. He's got other ways he's getting paid. There's other circumstances that are making him talk about it this way. These people don't know the real scientific facts. And the scientists, one science magazine has got the agreement of 45,000 scientists who've signed on saying that global warming is not true. The global warming and CO2 is not the problem. Now, global warming takes place, but there's other things that cause it. There's growing of soybeans to feed the planet can have an effect on that. There's the cloud cover has the biggest effect on CO2 and global warming would be cloud cover. There's other things that cause it, but not the CO2 from cars. The CO2, we have 3 trillion trees, and we produce could burn almost 200 billion tons of CO2, and we produce about less than 100 tons of CO2 on the planet. We've got enough trees to take care of the problem now, much less anything else. But it's not a problem because they make things grow faster. CO2 is not necessarily negative. You don't see anybody walking around coughing because of the CO2. They might cough because of something bad chemical in the atmosphere. That's not caused by CO2. That's from burning things in factories that, chemicals and things normally is where that comes from, or cigarettes and cigars and stuff. But it's not from CO2 in cars. Like I said, they're doing training to fight those fires. You're like, make sure. You might, in fact, if you have an electric vehicle now, call the local fire company and see if they've had any training on it. I'd want to know. You want to know that they can put that fire out if it starts. I was reading this the other day. I think it was it the Wall Street Journal? It was a major newspaper I was reading. I think it was the Wall Street Journal. And it said in that thing, like it said in many other magazines, that if a fire starts in an EV, completely starts to burn, to let it burn. You can't fight it. That was the best way to deal with it. Just let it burn. Because the gas that's coming out of it when it's lithium in your lungs, even in smoke form, can do a tremendous amount of damage. So you not only got the problem with the fire, but, let's say your car catches on fire and you jump out and you get a big whiff of that gas coming out of the battery, you could be going to hospital from that. It can have a terrible effect on your lungs. They don't talk about that, though. They don't bring up any of this stuff when you go there buying them. They're just talking about how much better it is. It's cheaper to drive. It is not cheaper to drive. That's bull. The smoke and the fumes are terrible toxic, right? If you live in an apartment or a home without a garage, how do you charge it then? Interesting, right? Outside in the rain and snow? Oh, great. That's good. But think about it. You don't have a place to charge it. If you got to run a cable out your apartment, down 3 flights of stairs, and out into the street to charge your vehicle, or do you have to get up 3 hours early for work and go to a charger? So that now your work day, instead of being 8 or 9 hours, is now 15 hours. They don't talk about all this stuff. They haven't figured all this out. They didn't stop and think about this, right? They didn't go through all the possibilities. Go to Google. Here's just something you can do. You can see if I'm telling you the real facts. Go to Google, who isn't known for its absolutely solid truth facts. They're not. But you can put up alerts. Alerts you can get the groups from because you can check on other sources for the alert. So go to Google and put an alert for electric car fires, and you'll be shocked. You will be shocked. There's places like in London where an electric car fire burnt the whole parking lot up. 20 cars. They don't talk about that, though. They don't talk about, they got the news on that ship off in the Azores in March of 2021. You didn't hear that on the news only once or twice by stations. Most of the fake news hides that stuff. It's all part of the group launch. No one's figured out on the left side that you can't win votes with lies. You can't. Only truth gets the public. Firefighters and other safety organizations are demanding more safety. There's a lot of hoopla over this going on, right? It's like the hydrogen vehicles. The reason they're already built some. They've just got to find a good way to get that tank into a car and move them around. That tank of hydrogen fuel. That's the problem. That's what they're working on. I'll believe there'll be an answer to that before you know it. And that's when they'll make sense. Hydrogen vehicles will make a lot more sense. Everything on an EV means more money. Charging your battery in most cities is as much as gas now. If you figure the mileage versus cost, but it takes longer. They're hard to find, and they lengthen your day no matter what. No matter what you do, whether it's a half an hour or 3 hours, whether you only charge 80% of the supercharger, you happen to find one that was empty, and you went there, you still took an extra half an hour to do it. You only charged it 80%. If you take the average difference in price for comparable models, figure the average driving a person does at 12,000 miles a year. That's when you see the facts. And another big fact is residual value. So if you paid $20,000 more for the vehicle when it was new, and then you get 20% less for it when it trades, and it could be, now you're talking about instead of paying $20,000 more, you paid maybe $40,000 at the end of 4 years. For a vehicle you paid $60,000, you're only getting $20,000, and it's cost you $40,000. Right now, electric vehicles are conjecture because there hasn't been enough of them out there. But if it's like smartphones and tablets, it's not going to be good news, right? The old tech usually needs a battery in a couple of years. And batteries never perform well after a couple of years. A 10%, charge difference is common after a couple of years. That would be very common. But battery warranties on EVs generally cover the battery when it gets down to 70%. That's the rule of thumb in the industry right now. And then they're prorated, so that if it was 5 years, You'd had the vehicle 5 years, and it was down to 70%. You might pay, instead of $15,000, you'd pay $7,500 for the battery. Well, I don't know about you, a $7,500 battery 4 years down the road, I could do a tune-up for $200 on a gas car. You got to remember that they all have brakes and shocks and tires and light bulbs and all that stuff. There's no maintenance advantage with an electric vehicle. With everything else, it's only the engine, and the only cost on a gas engine really is a tune-up and an oil change. And then over the life of a vehicle, in the first 100,000 miles, you could only spend maybe $400 or $500 on a vehicle. And on an electric vehicle, you could spend $7,500, maybe more, just for the battery, much less anything else. You know, there's a factory warranty company right now, a national warranty company. I forget the name of it. It's on the news. You hear them. It's a big name. And they'll cover vehicles. You can buy an extended warranty on your gas vehicle up to 200,000 miles on it. I think these guys that are doing this warranty thing probably understand durability, and that cars are built a lot better now than a gas car. It's called a national warranty company. And they're thinking to themselves that they're okay up to 200,000 miles on the average. You couldn't get 200,000 miles out of an electric vehicle battery if your life depended on it. They just don't last that long, and if it did, it'd be down to half. You know, it's going to be ridiculous when they're used. Because what are you going to do with it? Think about it. What's going to help the resale value on an electric vehicle? People buying used vehicles are trying to save money anyway. That's why they're buying a used vehicle. So now you either don't sell it, or you got to sell it so cheap that the people that traded it in took a whipping like you wouldn't believe. They would put a whole new meaning to no resale value. It would be like, that would be a tremendous problem. I mean, you want to cut your cash outlay, you're going to look at an electric vehicle? No, I always tell people, if you can't afford to buy a new one, don't look at a used one. Don't look at a used electric vehicle. They're not cheaper. They're going to cost more. They're not going to save you anything. All these things hurt resale value, and being more expensive means the drop in price will be more and hurt will be bigger. I think in many cases, the depreciation at 3 or 4 years on an electric vehicle is going to be ridiculously huge. It's going to be way, way more than anything you've ever dealt with before. What about maintenance? No tune-ups and oil changes on an EV. They got cables and wiring. And a gas vehicle wears over time. And you gauge by the wear and performance and the mileage, right? All the other maintenance is pretty much the same. Shocks, tires, and all that stuff in the EV vehicle. That's where the difference comes in. But you take an electric vehicle, if you pay more, let's say you pay, well, give you an example. The Chevy Blazer. Looking at a Chevy Blazer that was $37,000. It was a nicely equipped one, gas, with, air and brakes and automatic and all that stuff. It was a nice vehicle, $37,000 MSRP. The exact same equipment-wise and size, exactly the same, electric, is $59,000. Or $56,000, I'm sorry. It's $19,000 more. Now, if your depreciation was an extra, 20%, that means you would lose another $12,000 in depreciation on top of the normal depreciation. And 4 years down the road, the $37,000 one's going to be worth about, 15, 18. It probably goes down $20,000. That means that you're going to be literally 4 or 5 years down the road, an electric vehicle could almost be totaled, could almost be not worth repairing, not worth doing over again. Because if you have to have a new battery and it's going to cost you $10,000 or $15,000, it's not worth it. You'd have to dump it. You can't all of a sudden change it to gas. And here's the other side of it. Let's say that you don't worry about that. You're going to drive them both till they're dead. Okay, the difference in price between that Chevy Blazer and that electric Chevy Blazer is enough to buy all the gas you use at 12,000 miles a year for 15 years. Yeah, that's enough money to buy your gas for 15 years. The difference that you saved by not going electric. Let me ask you, how would you like to spend an extra $20,000 and then find out it didn't have anything to do with the climate change they were trying to sell you on? Oh, that's the thing I'm trying to say. Read the rules. Read them. You'll see that I'm not making it up. That's what it is. It's just not. You go to the websites like MIT and Caltech and places and look at the news that they have about it. Look at the different professors. PhDs, not people that are researchers. Researchers like, a guy that checks on traffic tickets as a researcher. No, I want scientists, the guys that really know. Global scientists. Well, there's a few that argue with that are getting, they're getting paid off. But most of them, the highest percentage, say there is no problem with climate change. And even if there is a problem with climate change, it doesn't mean that CO2 from vehicles is going to make a difference, because even, like I said, even if we do go to electric vehicles, the reason they won't have any resale and they're still going to be a pain is because even if we do, China and Russia and other countries aren't. And so it's not going to make any difference. This is a complete planet. We're one country. We could say, we're the righteous. We did it. Yeah, now we're broke. We're righteous, but we're broke. That's just not going to work. Watch the world news for EV fires and mineral news, right? Watch it. Keep an eye on it. You enough to realize what's being pulled on your leg and what isn't. Last but not least, this entire push for EVs is not going to help climate change. If the whole world gets on board, that's another article I read by a scientist out of University of Minnesota. He's a PhD too in climatology. And he said that if every country in the world wants electric vehicles, there were no more gas vehicles sold anywhere on the entire planet. It only could make less than a 2% difference in the CO2 on the planet. Less than 2%. It wouldn't be measurable. And the less than 2% wouldn't have an effect on anything. Plants would grow better. That's for one thing, for sure. And there's a lot of things that are misdescribed. The melting of the ice caps, why they melt. Not what they describe. If you go online and read about it, you'll find out, the real science, the real scientists, the PhDs have determined these facts. That's what you'll find out. If that's worth the destruction to economies and all the people, I don't think so. It'll not help the planet. Oddly enough, a little more CO2 will help plant life. So if you keep track, you'll realize what a dangerous change to mankind this could be. It could be bigger than you think. And there's 21 reasons I've given you why you shouldn't buy an electric vehicle. There's more. I can't go on the podcast forever. This is over an hour now, and I normally go 30, 35 minutes. There's tons of more reasons why. Every day something else comes up with those things that shocks you, that they're just not what they're meant to be. Don't let them con you. You want a gas vehicle. Don't let them pull your leg. Don't buy into this, because if we buy into it, it's like socialism. Once you buy in, it's tough getting out. Well, that's Deal Talk for this week. If you have a question, a request, or even a comment, please call or email me. Callers, it's 407-801-4071. That's 407-801-4071. Or email dealtalkpodcast@gmail.com. That's dealtalkpodcast@gmail.com. Please don't forget to do a review and do yourself a favor by getting a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon Kindle. That's Kindle, actually, because they're separate now a little bit. Kindle or Nook. Like I mentioned before, tell your friends and relatives. They'll save big, and they'll thank you. It's a great Christmas present to Informed Buyer. The podcast is free. They can listen to that for free. Get them something to listen to it on. I don't know, but you could save a gift that costs $3 could end up saving somebody thousands. So do it. However it can help you, contact me and you'll hear from me. And remember, every payment you get should be CPI. Complete payment information. Make sure you get every bit of information. What amount they're using, how many months they're figuring it on, what's the interest rate you're using, any required down payment to get to that amount that they're using to determine the payment. You need to know all that. Get all those terms every single time they quote you payment, not just the first time. And every price you get should be all in. Every single cost required to buy the vehicle. Everything. Tax, tag, dealer fee, options, every single cost. They call that OTD. Out the door.